Hey, first grade. How's it going? Happy Thursday to you. So we are going to uh, touch base here with good old Gooseberry Park. I was just kind of glancing back at the last chapter, and I was trying to remember what it was called. It was called The Wanderer. And if you remember, Kona has gone to Gooseberry Park to look for Stumpy and the babies. Well, no, I'm sorry, for Stumpy. They've got the babies. They've got Murray. They're at the house, at Professor Albert's house. But Stumpy has gone back looking. Kona has gone back looking for Stumpy. The problem is, when he gets to Gooseberry Park and starts asking around about where Stumpy is, the owl says, well, Stumpy's on her way to Paradise Lane. She thinks that's where Kona lives. The problem is, Kona doesn't live there anymore. He hasn't lived there since he was a puppy. And so now they have to figure out what to do because Stumpy is just out wandering the city in an ice storm looking for Kona's house. And so now we're going to read chapter 11, Guests. And I love the picture at the beginning. There's Murray and a pile of ornaments. Murray's a bit of a troublemaker, and he has lots of fun at Professor Albert's house. So I'm going to read this to you. Chapter 11, Guests. Later that morning, Murray rubbed his eyes, stretched his wings, and gave a giant yawn. Top, Bottom, and Sparrow were all sleeping soundly against him, and Kona was coming down the stairs. Murray grinned and waved at the dog. So, Kona, what's for breakfast? Breakfast? Said the dog. You want breakfast? Murray nodded. Murray, when I got back from Gooseberry Park this morning at 6, you ate a whole bag of Fritos, a box of Ritz crackers, a 16-ounce package of provolone cheese, and an orange. I ate an orange? Murray asked. It's only 10. How in the world can you still be hungry? Asked the dog. I never eat oranges, Murray said. How can you even move? Kona asked. They make me break out, said the bat. Murray looked down at the pile of sleeping babies. Hi, gang, he said. Want a Pop-Tart? Just wait here, said Kona. I'll bring something down. The pudding cup seemed to be all right for the babies last night, so I'll try to steal another one for them. But you have to stay here and keep quiet, Murray. We can't let Professor Albert find you. Sure, answered Murray cheerfully. No problem, but, what are my chances of getting a Mars bar? Just stay, said Kona, disappearing back up the stairs. Murray sighed. He looked all around the basement. Pipes, wires, what to do. Suddenly, the sound of a television show came drifting down. Do-do-do-do, do-do-do, do-do-do-do-do. Jeopardy! Cried Murray. My favorite! He jumped out of the box, ready to dash upstairs. Then he remembered Kona's instruction. Stay. Murray walked in circles, around and around the box, hearing the familiar theme song float down from above. Oh, said Murray, trying hard to stay, trying really hard to say. But Alex Trebek is my idol, he wailed, and flum, 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 he was on his way. The basement steps led to the kitchen. Murray flew in, and, hiding inside a china cabinet, poked his head out and looked toward the living room. Professor Albert was watching television and eating a Danish. Kona sat beside him, looking rather impatient and glancing often toward the basement. Kona didn't see Murray in the cabinet. And now we'll begin our round of Double Jeopardy, said Alex Trebek. Murray sighed with pleasure and settled down to watch. Soon, however, the sight and smell of Professor Albert's Danish was just too much for the tiny bat. He was hungry. He needed breakfast. Murray's nose went up in the air, sniffing, sniffing. Said the little bat to himself. Now, where would a professor keep a Danish? He flew to the top of the cabinet and looked out over the confusion of Professor Albert's kitchen counters. A bottle of vitamin C, bottle of vitamin A, bottle of vitamin E. Gee, I'm watering at the mouth. His eyes searched a different counter. Wheat germ, olive oil, soybean curd, oh gross. Maple granola, Oreos, lima beans, Oreos. Murray jumped so hard he hit his head on the ceiling. Thump! In the living room, Kona pricked up his ears. The dog looked toward the kitchen and saw Murray hopping up and down on top of the china cabinet, waving to him and pointing to something below. Kona nearly fainted. He shook his head fiercely at Murray. The bat mouthed some words to him. Creamy center was all Kona could make out. The Labrador frowned and firmly shook his head again. He had to wait for Professor Albert to take a morning nap before carrying any more food to the basement. The professor would likely be home all day, with the ice outside still so thick. They were lucky even to have the electricity back on. And Murray was supposed to be staying in the basement, but there he was, bouncing like a ball on the china cabinet. Murray had to behave. Kona vigorously shook his head at the bat again. "A flea, Kona?" the professor asked, putting down his Danish and rubbing Kona's ears. "No, just a pest," the Labrador said to himself. Back in the kitchen, Murray threw up his wings in exasperation. A whole bag of Oreos in the kitchen, and the dog only wants his ears scratched. Domestic animals, who can figure 'em? Floom. Murray dropped down to the kitchen counter. Just then Professor Albert rose and said something about needing some butter. "Uh-oh," said Murray, who was just getting to his first creamy center. Professor Albert started for the kitchen. "Double uh-oh," Murray said again, stuffing the Oreo in his mouth and looking for a place to hide. The professor took a few more steps toward the kitchen, but before he could get there, crash! What? The professor spun around. On the living room floor, Professor Albert's Chinese ginger jar lamp lay in 100 pieces. Kona sat very still and wagged his tail just a bit. Murray seized his opportunity. The cookie still in his mouth, he grabbed 2 more with his feet and flew down the basement steps. Back in the living room, Professor Albert was saying that he didn't understand how a lamp could knock itself off a table. And why did he keep thinking he heard a bird in the house? And really, weren't the past 24 hours the strangest anyone has ever seen? Kona, glancing over at the sleeping Gwendolyn, tried to wipe the guilty look off his face. He could not have agreed more with the old professor. Murray is going to cause trouble. Murray likes to eat. He likes to eat junk especially. And the professor had some junk in the house. And so Murray just decided he was going to help himself to that junk. Now, the next chapter that we're going to read, and I'm going to go ahead and read it for you right now, is called Food and Conversation. For the next few days, while Kona and Gwendolyn tried to figure out how to find Stumpy, bags of nacho chips, boxes of after-dinner mints, jars of crunchy peanut butter, and the occasional chocolate bar with almonds kept disappearing mysteriously from the kitchen. Poor Professor Albert. He would stand in front of the refrigerator or in front of the pantry, scratching his head in confusion. He would tell himself that he was not getting senile, that he just thought he'd bought that bag of chips or that jar of peanut butter. No cans of lima beans or spinach ever disappeared. It was as if some force in the universe wanted Professor Albert to eat only healthy things. And he still couldn't figure out why Kona was so nervous every time they watched Jeopardy. Things certainly had seemed odd since that ice storm. But Professor Albert's problems were nothing compared to Kona's. The dog was constantly going through the house picking up empty potato chip bags or candy wrappers. If Professor Albert found these, he would surely think that Kona was the one taking his food, and Kona certainly was not the one. "You have to clean up after yourself, Murray," Kona would say to the bat. "Oh, sorry, Kona," Murray would answer, "but I was watching Days of Our Lives through the heat vent, and I was so upset about Daniel and Laura that I forgot those Milky Way wrappers. Daniel is such a rat." Still, in spite of his hectic life and his worries about Stumpy, Kona was enjoying having Murray and the babies at his house. And late night was the best time of all. Long after Professor Albert had gone off to bed, complaining again that he just couldn't understand where an entire bag of Chips Ahoy could disappear to, and speculating that another one of those pesky chipmunks was sneaking in, Kona finally was able to relax, would softly pat over to Gwendolyn's bowl, pick her up gently in his mouth, and the two would sneak down into the basement. Murray, being nocturnal, was always wide awake and usually swinging by his feet somewhere. When Kona and Gwendolyn appeared, he would do a little somersault and land with his wings outspread. "Ta-da!" he'd say. "So, who's got a Pepsi?" Top, Bottom, and Sparrow would lift their little heads up and look up from the box at Gwendolyn. Oh dear, such pretty babies," the crab would fuss. "Such chubby little legs. And is that a tooth you have, Mr. Bottom?" Gwendolyn's antenna moved wildly in the air. Kona beamed with joy. He loved the babies, too. Then the friends would all gather in and around the box in the quiet night. Murray told vampire jokes. Why do vampires brush their teeth in the morning? To fight bat breath. Gwendolyn read everyone's palm, and Kona told them again the story of his icy journey to Gooseberry Park. They all loved to There's Kona. There's Gwendolyn. When Kona told them about the cat who strolled across the Oldsmobile, Murray said, "Oh, I know that cat. His name is Conroy. He eats Chinese too, plus French, Italian, Canadian, anybody will do." The bat cracked up over his joke. And at times they were serious and wistful. "Do you think she'll ever find us?" Kona asked. "I am certain of it, dear," Gwendolyn answered. "I can feel it in my bones." "You have bones?" Murray asked the crowd. "Figure of speech, Murray," said Kona. "Figure of speech." And after an hour or two of good food and conversation, Kona began to yawn. "How can you be sleepy?" Murray asked. "It's only 3 o'clock." "Even I am a bit drowsy," Gwendolyn said, smiling at the bat. "I think it may be due to all this lovely food you provided." She gestured to the graham crackers, the raisin bread, the banana chips scattered about. "We didn't even get to the pretzels and bean dip yet," said Murray. Kona and Gwendolyn bade their friend good night, kissed the babies, and returned quietly upstairs. Kona eased Gwendolyn down into her bowl and looked at her through the glass. Each night he said the same thing: "I hope Stumpy finds us." And each night Gwendolyn's answer was the same: "She will." All right, chapter 13. We'll start tomorrow. The Weasel. Now you know that's not a good sign. Look at him. He just looks like he's kind of up to no good. All right, tomorrow we'll check in with chapter 13, The Weasel.